back to the Berg Podcast. Thanks for joining us today. With me today is Dan.
Hey, everybody.
And today we're talking about professional development and the sort of like the internal growth of our people. And we've talked about this topic before, and a lot of times we talk about the idea of like promotion, developing people to promote within. But what we don't talk about a lot, in my opinion, is how we sort of try to set people up for success and then kind of give them probably more than their, a bigger bite than they would have taken themselves at times, and then let them kind of develop and grow into the role, right?
Yeah. So what we, by nature, by our culture, we like ownership mentality, and, we're really big on trying to be accountable and responsible and own your piece and all those things. So we identify that a lot of our leadership in the company, in the field, and in the office are people who want to take ownership, right? Who identify a problem and they say, I want to work on this and come up with a solution and deliver a result. And so when we do that, a lot of times that provides for opportunity for people to grow and get promoted. But the other piece of it, like you're saying, that we don't talk about is that once someone has more responsibility, we tend to say, okay, well, you're doing well with that responsibility. Let's look at some more tasks that you might be able to do and sort of put the opportunity out there that they could do it, right? We don't inherently say like, hey, this is now your job. And sometimes that's a flaw, that we just sort of like open it up like, hey, you could do this and then see how they do. But I think we've been more intentional about it over the last couple of years, where when we do it, we now say like, hey, what do you think about taking on this new piece of responsibility or this new avenue that the company has to manage, and then see how the team does with it and try and support them. And lately, I think we've been really successful at doing that and having people take over pieces that were lost between us, right? It wasn't stuff that didn't get done. It was just stuff that fell between multiple people. And the person who picked it up was generally just the first person to notice that it had become a problem. Yeah. And then you deal with it.
You say this. It was actually, you say this because Brad says it about you, about the sort of a see problem, fix problem mentality,
fix problem.
Right? And actually, Tori and I were having this conversation, I don't know, within the last few days. And like an attribute of people who generally are find success, career growth, et cetera, within Berg Construction is sort of that ownership thinking, that ownership mentality. It's like finding solutions, creating solutions, and then executing solutions a lot of times. Not finding solutions and distributing responsibility, finding solutions and then actually seeing things through. Yeah. But a lot of times that turns into someone owning a problem, or not even a problem, but owning a process that they may or may not align correctly with the scope of what their job should be. Yep, right.
For sure.
And at times, like internally, Berg Construction specifically has like grown because of that. And we've had good people who are willing to like dig in, to do the work, to take the responsibility, own the process indefinitely.
Yep.
And then we end up in spots where we're like, well, they're so busy doing things that are not their job that they're struggling to get the things that are their job done.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's top down. Like you go, you go back a few years to the days when you and I worked together every single day, side by side in an office that was, adjacent. And I honestly don't know that there's somebody in the company that does it more than you do it, frankly. Like, and I'm not saying it because you're sitting here. I'm saying it because I could just, like, Brian's role is the CFO, right? Brian is the CFO. Brian is also responsible for IT, was also responsible, when we were at the main building, you were responsible for all building maintenance. If a toilet got clogged, Brian would have to figure it out and call somebody, whether it be Scott or somebody else. If there was an IT problem, Brian would figure it out. If we were going to do any wiring for internet or other things, Brian would do it. If we were all working and it snowed, Brian was the one responsible for plowing the parking lot. right? If it rained a bunch of times or people couldn't get in, Brian would mow the grass, right? Like you just go to all these, they have nothing to do with CFO, and more than nothing to do with it. I would challenge you to find another company where the CFO would even do the thing, like would consider doing them. You know what I mean? Like for the CFO, like go to any one of the companies and say like, hey, I think your new job description is going to include you're also mowing the grass, right? And they're going to be like, yeah, I'm not doing that.
Probably not.
Like
right?
probably not. They wouldn't even do it from the point that you started to make, from it being a good use of their time, right? Like because they won't be able to do their main job.
Sure.
But you would just push on and say like, okay, I'm going to figure out how to do both of these things because they needed to be done. So I think what's happened over the last probably 4 years maybe is a concerted effort to identify the pieces of each of our responsibilities that are actually jobs, and then try to hire people to do those jobs.
Right. Or realign responsibilities. Right? Yeah, exactly.
Because part of the problem is I have failed numerous times at trying to hire people to do a piece of a responsibility that someone formerly owned. Like I look at it and I interview people and I'm like, this is perfect. This is going to work exactly. And it doesn't work because sometimes because I am not great at giving people a purpose of saying like, this is going to be your responsibility and here's how you're going to complete it, right? Like I would tend to say like, you are a skilled, capable person. This is your scope of your work. I need you to do that and find whatever you can do to support the team and develop that role, right? To grow. Mm-hmm. And that's really what we're talking about is that we like the skill set of someone who will identify what needs to be done that would help the team and then do those things.
Right.
But we've had to become more intentional, to use a Brian word. We've had to become more intentional about not only letting them do it, but giving them the guidance to understand what we want them to do and what the expectation is, and that we're asking them to do it, right? So still might be something they like lean towards and take on, but to physically say like, this is what we need you to do. Yeah. And recently we've gone through the process of shifting people internally, and no one really had a promotion and no one had a title change, but we shifted what some people had to do. And then we identified things that maybe we don't need to do, right? Because that is one of the downsides of that sort of a culture is you see problem, fix problem. Like, we brought in someone to do all our geotechnology work and all the survey work, and we could do all these things. And we created a whole new scope of work that we could do that it turns out was not ideal. And it just didn't fit us. It got outside of the core work that we wanted to do and exposed us to potential issues and liability, but also just wasn't what we do.
Right.
And so we had to shed that responsibility and say, okay, we're not going to do that. We're going to pay someone to do that, which is hard for us as a team. Right.
Yeah.
And so we've done that. But in the same token, I think one of the really frustrating parts, probably for you over the last year and a half, right, has been, I think we would agree that we're getting better at working on deliverables that are needed to manage a company, right? At working on hitting deadlines of getting months closed and getting invoices in and things coded and credit cards accounted for. And it's something that you have talked to me about for years. Like, this has to be done. And I was like, I know it has to be done. We're going to work on it. But then we'd get to the business of our work, right? And we would just focus on the operational side of our work and doing the work. And I think that recently I've taken more responsibility of saying, we are going to hit these deadlines and trying to establish meetings. You talked about the kick-ass meetings that you got me, and trying to set it up to say, we are going to be very structured in delivering all of these things because they're necessary. And in a matter of months, we went from not helping you to get them to pushing to get them to you as, in a timely fashion that's working.
Right.
And I feel like quietly, you're probably like at home, you're like, I can't believe, like, I have asked for this for 5 years and they wouldn't do it. And then as soon as they decided they wanted to do it, then they gave them to me, which is great because now you have them. But it's got to be frustrating because if you would have had them before, you probably could have made, helped me to make better decisions, helped Ford to make better decisions, because you would have had the information to supply us, but we wouldn't even give you the information. So that's a lot of talking for me about it.
Sure.
But it facilitated me saying we had to take Brad and we had to devote Brad, and Brad is going to have to focus on us coding things properly, us getting things in, us getting our invoices out, us managing our WIP, us all these things. And I had to go to Brad and say, where in an old world, we might have said like, okay, Brad, could you also look at this, like, and help with this? I had to go to him and I said like, Brad, I want this to be your responsibility. Like, you are going to do this. Does that work for you?
Yeah.
And then have him sit down with you and go over that. And I've done that with Brad and Scott and Dylan as we reshuffled. And then, then we had Stetson come in, and while Stetson had a promotion, that took him out of the field to a project manager role, then there's been just a rapid acceleration of his actual full responsibility of being a project manager that's gone significantly faster than I had thought it would, partly because Stetson's doing a great job, and partly because we're being so intentional about specifying what the requirements of that job are. What, not requirements, that's not the right word, but what the expectations are, And similarly with Clemis, who was internal, and then Anthony, who was external, right? That we've brought them in, and we're setting these roles. And it's one of the reasons I really wanted to talk about it, was because it is sort of almost unnerving to watch how well it works when you just plan, right? Because as a company that grew on looking at opportunity and trying to evaluate risk and then going, we didn't devote the time to really look at how could we streamline it, because we were successful. So we just kept moving, and we'll just keep replicating this and it'll work, until it doesn't. And then, some of the tests we've gone through over the last 4 years have made me look at it and say like, okay, I don't want to do that again. Partly because it's not, it should never be replicated, right? Like, not that you couldn't replicate it. You shouldn't. Like, I realize the mistakes, and I don't want anyone else to have to suffer through the mistakes that we made. So I want to be able to get it to a point where it runs in a way that is a little bit more predictable and a little bit more intentional, so that our team can then actually do what we preach and have internal promotions where they actually gain control and are more empowered and are able to run the company, because we're giving them something that can be managed in a way that can follow a guideline. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And it feels like a lot of change. I don't know that it's inherently a lot of change. It might be just more focus and direction a lot of times, right? Like, as you sort of shift or realign responsibilities, it's not significantly different. It's just more it's just more focused, and that's been good, I think. One of the things that I was thinking about while you were talking there is the many of the names that you mentioned as you were going through that are people who have been core to being the bridge between the operations and the office or whatever you want to call it, right? And as those like bridges sort of get I don't even want to say repaired, because I don't think they were damaged, but they seem to be getting reinforced right now, right? Those connections are stronger. The value of the importance between the two is getting stronger. Like none of it exists or is necessary if the field operations isn't happening, right? Like there's no like question about that. But when the field operation is happening, the other piece becomes essential. And watching some of those pieces like be bridged more cleanly has really been like, I think like an intentional part of what you've been trying to do, especially over the last 12 months. Mm-hmm. It is a change in focus for sure. And one of the things I was thinking about as you were kind of talking through that is when you sort of make that kind of a switch in behavior, it feels like chaos at times.
It does.
Right?
It does. It feels chaotic to me to do it.
Yeah. And your people are probably like feel like they're in the midst of the chaos, which is probably why some of like the the conversations you and I have had around about, the kick-ass meetings and stuff like that has become more valuable potentially.
Yeah, for sure. So, when you look at it, it's really odd because I'm changing nothing. And I don't mean that means nothing's being changed.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going from, at times, zero structure guiding us on what we have to do, right? Like, when do I have to have everything coded? I mean, I always knew I had to have it coded by the end of the month. It wasn't like you and I sat down and I was like, Brian, if you would just tell me what day the coding had to be completed by, all the invoices had to be entered, I would get it done. It was, well, Brian, that invoice just came in. Like, you got to give me a week or two for the guys to deal with it. But it came in on the 30th. Like, no, you don't have a week or two. Like, if you had already done the coding from the 15th, you wouldn't be buried in it right now and not being able to deal with the 30th, right?
Sure.
So normally when people sense change, you change something. You know what I mean? Like, if you're going north and you turn east, that's a change. But it's funny because it's almost like the compass was just spinning, right? And we were just running wide open for a long time and doing it successfully by most measures, right? By most metrics, we were very effective. But I don't know that it was sustainable long term. And I think that's what really happened is we realized as a team that it may not be sustainable to run this way. Or it might even be more fair to say we accepted that it wasn't sustainable. I don't believe that we thought it was sustainable. And I know that you did not think it was sustainable. But we thought it became not acceptable anymore. It wasn't fair to do to people. And so we recognized that and sort of zeroed in and said, okay, let's develop some processes. And for me, the start of it, and it's funny you say 12 months, the start of it was actually you and I on a plane, and we were coming back from a peer group meeting, and we were talking, and I don't remember the core of what we were talking about, but it was the beginning of me really coming to the realization that I was going to be responsible for Berg Construction as a whole, even more than I felt like I was. And we had a conversation, and you said, that you thought I could achieve whatever was necessary to be achieved, so long as somebody told me what the goal was. Like, and almost questioned, did we understand what it was we were trying, where the fence was, what my responsibilities were, what the expectations were. I'm doing a terrible job of saying what you said.
Yeah. Right.
But that struck me at that point. And from that point on, I started to be more intentional about saying, okay, what does Ford want me to do?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what does Ford want the company to do? What does Ford want the commercial division to do? What does Ford want Dylan Reese to do? What does Ford want? And work my way all the way down to like how much, you get to as granular as you can. Like, how many hours does the piece of equipment have to run? So I went down this rabbit hole, and it took me probably 3 to 6 months to go down the rabbit hole and then come back out of the rabbit hole and say okay, I think I have an understanding now of what it would take, and then start to say, okay, well, how do I establish processes, I guess, but it's not really processes. How do I establish how we're going to govern that way? Like, how are we going to act as a team and understand what parameters, what metrics, what are we looking to measure? And it was at about that point, which is probably 9 to 10 months ago, where Ford and I met, and I started having an understanding that I was actually going to have more responsibility, where I was going to need to make decisions further out, and we had talked in the past, and we've been doing the podcast, we said 4 years.
It's been,
right. So, in the beginning, I always said my decisions, as I grew in the company, my decisions went from being, 3 week to 6 months decisions, to 6 months to a year decisions, to a year to 2 year decisions. And over the last, 9, 10 months ago, we came to the understanding that I was going to start to be responsible for decisions further out. I was going to be 1 to 3 or 3 to 5 years or something. I would have to look at that. What really took me a while to get to was realizing that I was going to have to do what we had always preached about solutions. Like, I was not going to be able to bring forward problems anymore and say, hey, let's talk about this and come up with a solution, right? Because for a long time, the way that we operated, I was the operational link that then would bring forward a problem and say, this is the problem. We have a few things. What do you want to do?
Mm-hmm.
And for a good 6 months, I continued that behavior. I identified all these problems and tried to bring them to Ford. And Ford would almost push them back at me and say, well, what would you like to do? And I started to get frustrated, and you and I would talk about it, and I was just like, I don't I almost didn't understand. I was like, I don't understand. Like, you clearly have an answer. You own the company. You want to do something. Just tell me what it is you want to do and I'll go do it. To your point of if somebody just gives me a goal, I'll achieve the goal. And about probably, 4 months ago, I realized, and I think I came to you. I think you were the first one I said it to. I said, I think I realized the problem. He doesn't want to tell me the solution anymore. He wants me to say, this is what we're going to do and just go in that direction and do it. And I guess that's really what the culmination of leadership is, of being in charge is doing that, is making the decisions with everybody's best interest and the best information you have and trying to go forward. But that was a big change for me, but not a change, and
Sure.
So it is similar for me, whether it was, Jack Hopta or Stetson or Dylan or Brad or me. All of us had to do the same thing. There wasn't an inherent change in the responsibility, but there was a change in the function, so that I now need you to own these pieces a little bit more, and so as I became responsible for a year to 3 or whatever that math is, Brad and Stetson and Dylan became responsible for 6 months to a year, which meant that, Anthony and Dylan and Stetson had to be responsible for today to 6 months. You know what I mean?
Right.
So all those were changes, but they were really just formalizing how the company would run.
Yeah.
And I'm really pleased with how everything's gone, but it has been chaotic because it's, as you've watched me try and learn what to do for myself, I've also had to try and set up parameters with the team. And I've done that. I think I've tried to be effective in including them. Like, I didn't really make any of these decisions on my own. I tried to field as much information as I could, which is probably also funny for you, right? Because I'm notorious for, I have plenty of information to make this decision.
Sure. Yeah.
But I wanted to make sure we were going in the right direction. I wanted to make sure that everybody bought in and that everybody could do what I was asking them to do. And we'll see. It feels like it's effective.
Yeah.
I was really happy. I think 2 months ago, we closed the month faster than we've ever closed it. Everything was delivered to the people that needed to have it on time, and it was even frustrating to me, frankly, because I was like, unbelievable. We could have done this the whole time.
Sure.
It would have made my life much easier, which is what you would say the whole time. But I just couldn't. Sometimes you can't see your way out of a problem. You know what I mean? You have to step outside the problem and then evaluate.
Well, and I think part of that, and I have something I want to go back to, so I'll try not to forget it. But I think part of what you're saying is like the where it fits in the things that are valuable to how you make decisions changed. Because as it became more your personal responsibility to make decisions further out instead of closer to the moment, I think that the value of having that feedback faster became more valuable. Is that fair?
That is a very clean and efficient way of putting it. Yes.
So
I now needed the information you needed. The information you had said, like, hey, this would be helpful. I now needed, and I needed it fast because to make the decisions, I need the information. So somebody's got to get me this information, which is what you would preach to me, but you were trying to deliver the information to Ford.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So one other thing I was thinking about as you were kind of talking about, you think it's going well, and while it has not become less, it's become less chaotic because even though it's still like very, like we're still in the thick of it, right? Like it's still new, a lot of it. It's still like adapting and adjusting, but it's become less chaotic in many ways because it feels like the understanding and of the realignment is working. What have you? And the answer is probably, I'm sure, like yes to some degree, but like, have you checked in? like, do you know what I mean? Like now that the dust. It's more of like you can see it. You can see through it now, even though the dust is still there. Like we're not in the middle of the sandstorm, but the dust is still in the air. But as that starts to like clear up, and you perceive that it's working, have you what is the one of the hard parts I think for me in those situations is like, all right, good, it's working now, or we figured it out. Like checking in at some regular interval to make sure that the sentiment you're feeling is the sentiment your team is feeling. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. So
Yeah.
I think by nature, I'm very intentional about communicating, right?
Yeah.
So I struggle at times because I think I am a strong communicator,
Right.
right? But I also operate with very little information. So you know what I mean? So I only,
Yeah.
that's probably not a good way of putting it. Because I'm trying to move to a goal, as you would say, I'm
Sure.
very
Whoa.
task oriented. And so I only really check in by nature to get where we're going. So I've been very intentional. And I wonder actually what Brad and Scott and Dylan, Stetson, Anthony,
Right.
and Dylan, what they think about it, what they notice. And even truthfully, Tracy and Tori,
Mhm.
right? Who I interact with a lot. And Kels. Aubrey to a point, but lesser because Aubrey's responsibilities are so focused that really
Right.
it's only if she needs something or I need something, then
Right.
Aubrey or I will communicate directly. But I've been intentional of like, I'll walk down and say like, hey, how are you doing? How are things feeling? How was, like, and I think it almost, I think that the team is not sure whether I'm asking them if they like feel okay, like not health wise, but like, how are
Sure.
you doing mentally? Like, or if I'm actually asking like, how are we doing? Right. But I'm leaving it open because that is the question. The question is like, how are we feeling? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like Brad, how are you doing? Like, how is
Yeah.
this adjustment? Are you okay?
Right.
Is there anything I can do to help? You know what I mean? But I don't want to pester because I hate micromanaging.
Sure. And that's what I was. That's where I was.
And so
thinking.
that's the problem is I'm
Yeah.
trying to check in, but I'm trying to make it very conversational.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think I do it more than is probably necessary, but because I'm trying to do it in a conversational manner where if I just every day, check in at least once a day to say,
Mhm.
hey, how are you feeling? What can I do? Is there anything, are you having any issues?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to micromanage. I'm trying to see how they're feeling because we've made a lot of changes,
Yeah.
I mean, and people identified it, you know what I mean? I had a meeting a while back with Don Hunter and we were going to make one of the last changes I was making. And Don was like, okay, I sort of thought you might make this change, but I was also worried when you said, hey, can you meet me in your office? You know what I mean? Because people were nervous because I was going through and trying to look at where was people adding benefit, right? Like
Right.
I really, really zeroed in on are we all rowing? Are we helping the boat to go faster, right?
Yep.
Because it's one thing to say, are we not working against each other? It's
Right.
another thing to say, are we all on the right boat?
Because
do we all wanna be on
sailing works, but is it racing? Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
And I felt like we needed to get back to racing.
Yeah.
So to do that, I had to remove anybody from the boat that wasn't going to help it go faster. So even if you were effectively working, but it wasn't making us go faster in a straight line, in a racing scenario, I was removing people from the boat. And so I think that created a lot of uneasiness too, because people started to question. So that also made me, I feel like, had to communicate more to make sure the people that I valued knew it. And then I said, I appreciate what you're doing. You know what I mean? Because you don't know, I'm not trying to create chaos.
Well, and value is a tough thing too. Cause I think that you would say like, even some of the people that you like toiled over and had to come to the conclusion weren't not doing their jobs, just weren't making the boat go faster. I think it wasn't that you didn't value them. It's just that
Right.
like the place inside of our organization in the moment, it was unfortunately became not part of the scope of what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, no, that's very
which is
true.
really hard. Right?
That is very true.
Because you're still dealing with humans
yeah, and
good people and yeah.
So and I don't want to put a percentage on it,
Sure.
but like
Yeah.
the majority, if not all, of the people that didn't remain on the boat,
Yeah.
were not easy people for me to address that I was going to make a change. Right. Like
Yeah.
I will acknowledge that in a perfect world, when company's running smoothly, any company, people that you move on from, I always say basically fired themselves, right? Like they did some things that made them not part of the team. And it makes it pretty easy to say like, okay, you know what I mean? Like if somebody, we've had people steal, right? Like if
Mm.
someone steals or if someone
Right.
doesn't show up, like if you don't show up 3 days in a row, I mean, I have to sign something and you're no longer work here. And we may have to talk about it when you realize you don't work here anymore, but you did that,
Right.
you know? And in this example, these were people that I valued, that had skills that I thought could be a part of the team. And, you know, just, it didn't make the boat go faster.
Yeah.
And so that's much harder to address and move on from, because we're all human, you know what I mean? We're all also tasked with a job and a responsibility.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you hit the nail on the head with that. So but I have made I am making an attempt, and hopefully it's effective. And, you know, if the guys are listening to the podcast, if there's a better way to do it, tell me the better way.
Yeah.
You know, but that's what I'm trying to do, is just check in and see their temperature, see how they're feeling. And also be as open as I can about why we're doing what we're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What the plan is. And it's why I've really zeroed in on the 1-page plan.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, for 5 years, you and I would have to do those rock things. And you and I and Ford, we'd work on the rocks like an hour and a half before Nina got there, so we could say we did something.
Right.
Right. Whereas now, every meeting that I have, I'm like, hey, guys, like, this stuff has to be done, and myself included. You know, I had to come up with that dashboard, and I
Sure.
think I came up with one that's effective and I think shows what we want to. You know, and it's completely different because you said it at one point, actually. You were talking about reading the books when Ford gives us the books. There is a difference between reading a book because you want to read a book and reading a book because you have to. Assignments are only worth, you know, what the assignment's worth. You know what I mean? What's it worth? 50 points? 50 points.
Sure.
Great. But when you do something because it matters, because you value it, because you think it will yield a result or help, then it's far different. And my approach to that 1-page plan, my approach to, you know, rereading the book, all of that is very different this time. And it's not to say I blew it off the first time. It meant a lot the first time, but it wasn't as impactful. This time it was different because I was trying to figure out, how to step into Ford's shoes.
Sure.
And how to lead us in the right direction.
Well, that's professional development.
That's professional development. And the hardest part for me, and I've said this a bunch of times, is first, you know, people have asked me, a lot of people recently have asked me, like, so what's it like to be president? And I was like, it's no different. Like nothing has changed. I feel the same level of responsibility that I felt, you know, 3 years ago.
Yeah.
I know stuff has changed, right? And I know that, but it doesn't feel different because I didn't join Berg to be the president of Berg.
Sure.
Like, I had never even considered that as an option, truthfully, like never. I thought Ford would run Berg forever.
Right.
It is actually something you and I have talked with that I had to deal with, was a realization that it wasn't always going to be Ford and I just sitting there figuring it out, because that's fun for me. That I was going to have to take a different, you know, more responsibility, a different role. It was never my intention to end up in this spot. And so for me, the key is finding the team members and empowering them so that they can each do their job, which then in a perfect world, I think lets me go back to do the thing that Ford says I'm good at. You know what I mean? And still be the president. But I don't need to, like, I'm not going to walk around and, like, you know what I mean? Like Tori, and she'll hear it and listen to it and probably be upset with herself. But like Tori says president all the time. And I'm like, it's still the same.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? It's
So
just like, thanks, Prez. Right. And it's like, she's doing it to like acknowledge and to be nice and everything else. But like, I don't want to lead that way. You know what I mean? Like, I just want to, you need me to shovel, I'll shovel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You need me to run Traco, I'll run a Traco. Dozer, I'll make a mess for you. You know what I mean? But whatever needs to be done, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's Ford's intention.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think it is for sure. And I think, like, for me, like one of the key components of leadership, and I think you're living it out, like, and, you know, from, you know, as we've talked about this a number of times in the last 12 months, as you have kind of tumbled into the president role, and right from having not really known that it was a promotion to having now,
which I don't think did we ever talk about that?
I think we may.
I think we may have talked about
I don't know,
Yeah.
But like for me, one of the key components of leadership is always one, establishing the goal, 2, empowering your team to achieve the goal, and then 3, removing the obstacles that are preventing them to achieve the goal.
Yeah.
It's and I think that like that's you're living it out, right? And I think you see that you're doing it, and which is awesome. Because at the moment, because it's a different role for you, even though the responsibility hasn't changed.
Mm-hmm.
You've always been the one who was in charge of achieving the goal, as opposed to now empowering a team of people to achieve the goal on behalf of the organization. And you sort of saying like, what's getting in the way of that happening, and either, realigning or removing the things that are in the way. So,
and that's, at the end of the day, we have an amazing team that we've built over the last, 20 years. And I'm so proud of our team, because some of our team isn't even in Berg. You know what I mean? Like there's other pieces and people who have developed professionally far beyond what most people would have ever thought they were capable of, and they're doing great things. And we have brought in people, and we have taught people internally from the ground up, you know what I mean? Bringing people in that were laborers and just office staff, and they have developed into amazing people that if we can just, like you said, move the obstacles out of the way, and most importantly, not be the obstacle.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's the only thing that bugs me about the president thing sometimes, is like, this has nothing to do with me. Like, I'm now the least important person. Like, I can help with where we are in a year to 3 to 5 years. Like, that's my responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
But in day to day, all I can do is get in your way. Like, because by the time I come in and you explain to me what the problem is, even if I had a good solution, you've wasted your time trying to have me come up with a solution that you're probably more qualified to deal with anyway.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Our people are more qualified than I am. So that's really the biggest piece for me, is don't be the obstacle, right? Like, help to move all the obstacles out of the way. And I think I can do that. But then also don't get in their way. Like, let our people do their job. Let our people find good work with good people. Let them manage the jobs. Let them do the actual work. Get out of the way and let everybody do their job, and just focus on doing my job.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out what that is exactly.
Well, it still changes every day, but
it could be mowing the grass.
It could be mowing the grass. Probably not, but could be. That's a good place, I think, to wrap it up. Folks, we hope that you got something from this, and we hope that you come back for another episode.